Hey everyone, this guide is focused on importing assets from Eudemons into Conquer. Now we always were able to add weapons from Eudemons and they would sort of work. You had also the workaround of being able to use Bittern to export C3 to 3ds Max and then using an old version of 3ds Max to export it back to Conquer, but that was a huge pain. So if we go ahead and load up this model in the viewer here, it looks pretty good, but if we add it to Conquer, it's all the wrong direction. So that's what I'm mentioning there, where if you just add it default, it's not going to look good. Now there were some servers where they wanted this look, where they were holding it backwards like a dagger. I think that was kind of cheating, but to each their own, right? I mean, maybe it fits the aesthetic of the server. So what we need to do here is we need to rotate this weapon, and it needs to go down by about 180 degrees, and it needs to go over by, I would say, about 45, just based on my past research. So that way it's not on an angle in this direction here. So all we would do there is we would load it up in the model viewer, and we would select either the mesh object or the parent object. In this case, it doesn't matter because there's only one part to it. If there were many parts, then we would need to be sure to select the root parent object there. So at that point, we would just go ahead and apply our rotation, so 180 by about 45. It might be negative 45, I honestly don't remember. And we would apply that rotation. So that's going to show up in the model viewer right away, so you can get a quick feel for how the rotations are working. At that point, we would export it, and we would overwrite our mesh that we have, making sure to back it up beforehand. You don't want to lose assets and have to like re-extract an entire client or something like that. So before you start on any weapon, make sure that you do back up all your data. So at that point, you would have it exported and it would override this look. You would just have to reopen the client to see it. In this case though, I duplicated the weapons so that we could do a quick preview here. And it's going to look like this. So that's exactly what we'd want for rotation, but we still have the hurdle of effects. There's nothing attached to this. It's pretty cool on its own, but we're going to want some glows in there. So what we can do is let's go back to the initial look of it, so before it's rotated, and we're going to attach all the effects that we can from Eudemons. So I already have a guide on how to do that. It's a matter of adding all of the 3D effect.ini entries for that weapon, and then linking up those 3D texture IDs to a DDS file, and linking up the 3D effect object IDs to a C3 file. That's just a matter of copying it from the other client. It's just knowing what you're looking for. So I definitely read through that guide if you're not familiar with how to find those IDs and where to copy them from and to, but I've already done that. So we're going to close this, and we're going to attach this effect to both versions of that weapon so we can preview it quickly. And we'll see how it looks. I have to open up the client again completely or it won't work. So as you can see, that effect is quite intense, to put it mildly. This is actually only using about 2 of the 8 effects. There's just so many in the Eudemons files. I think they're a little too much for Conquer, but maybe you'll want all of them. I would warn you though that the model exporter and editor does not currently support all file types. For example, particle effects, so little things springing off from it, those are not yet supported. I'm working on it, but there's not a whole lot of public documentation on that file type, and it's not something I have a whole lot of experience with. So I am working on it, but it's just not there yet. Also, if you're specifically working with Eudemons files, there are certain effects that, for whatever reason, they will display in the client, but they won't work on a weapon. They'll freeze all the other animations. I don't know why that is. I'm assuming it's just they're not fully supported by this client, but we're not going to worry about that right now because we're only going to add these 2 effects. So if we look at how it should be rotated, the effect is still there, but it's completely wrong. So what we want to do is we want to go back to our model viewer, which I left open, and we're going to push F2 to load a new file. So we just need to locate all the client assets that we're looking for. So again, we're copying it through Action 3D Effect, linked to 3D Effect.ini, linked to 3D Texture.ini, and 3D Effect Obj.ini, because everything has to be complicated. So we're going to go ahead and go in looking for it. I have the path backed up here somewhere. There we go. So I know that it's ID 2 and 3 that I'm looking for here, and as you can see, it loads in just fine. So we want to select the root object and we want to rotate it. Now if we take a look in game, we only seem to need to rotate it by not 180, but 45 less than that. So we're going to go ahead and do that by be 135. We'd apply that rotation. And as you can see, that has been applied here, but it doesn't line up with the weapon. You don't need to be worried about that right now because it doesn't matter. These are going to be attached to the world space, or whatever you want to call it, of this weapon. So all we really care about is how much it needs to be rotated compared to where it initially started at. In this case, I'm going to skip ahead a step and load the second effect, in this case 3.c3, and you can see it's playing nicely. This is what I was mentioning. Some objects will have many different parts. We could hide them, as you can see, it's a tiny piece there, only a little bit. If we wanted only a certain part of the effect, we could select these and delete them. That would delete them completely, and we could then export it and it would still work fine. In this case though, we want the full effect, but we want them all to be rotated. So we need to select the root object here and rotate by 135 degrees. And you'll notice, conveniently enough, that it aligns with this effect. So at this point, you want to export both of these, overriding the existing files, and then you're going to do what we do every time, reload the client. I'm actually going to close that again because I have to apply these. So I've already done these just so I don't mess something up and enter a wrong angle. And we're going to load it up and see how it looks. I'd say that's pretty much on point. There's a tiny little mismatch here, but honestly that just could be how it's supposed to work. You could mess around in there trying to rotate it by like 1 degree at a time, but honestly in terms of Conquer weapons, I think this is pretty good. So that's all working. We could move on, add extra layers of effect, maybe an effect as we swing the weapon, maybe a little bit of an aura around it to just sort of outline the base model. You could apply as many effects as you want. But in this case, we have successfully imported the weapon into Conquer. We have successfully imported at least some of its effects, and it looks pretty good. So I'd say that's all we really need to do for this video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully this gives you a good starting point.